What's up, guys? Welcome back. It's me, John Guetta, and Logan Martinez.
What's up?
So today we're going to be hitting more of the darker side of wrestling. The things that Vince McMahon doesn't want to talk about. When you mention it towards him, he gets a little hectic. Armpits get a little sweaty. He goes to sleep having that little nightmare. Who knows what's going to happen? Ric Flair. So I just want to start it off by saying, for some of y'all that don't know, WWE was really stepped away from the PG era because of the main reasons. There was a lot of domestic abuse. It was like being used as like a storyline. It was like funny, throwing that little stuff out there. Everyone got a little laugh. And I think the last like real big thing they're trying to get going was Michelle McCool. She was pretty popular during that time, and her boyfriend, quote unquote, because wrestling isn't real, uh, Chuck Palumba. You know.
It's not real.
Anyways, Chuck Palumba, who was kind of like showing more like that he was very abusive to McCool at the time while they were together in wrestling, which isn't real. And so they're like having the storyline was more like they would have matches where Palumba was like fighting a guy, and then all out of nowhere, like she would cost him the match accidentally. Like something would happen where he was getting disqualified or this and that. But like she would bump into him and then he got rolled up. I remember I saw that. And he would just start yelling at her, get angry, punch the wall, all this stuff, showing that he was like really abusive towards her. And during this whole storyline, they had her with a black eye, kind of like stating that he hit her like somewhere down the line. And it ended the way that like the where it got to the limit where it got to was he had a match. Palumba had a match with her new boyfriend at the time, and I believe he did win the match. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I know that he ended up beating her during that match and then beat her new boyfriend up. And I think it was going to take somewhere from there. But they decided that it wasn't really necessary to have that in wrestling anymore. Like, it wasn't like they don't need to be having those kind of jokes or like that kind of storyline to get the interest. That's like what a lot of them were thinking. So they decided to not be like that anymore and take it to PG more side of things. What do you think about
I
that,
think,
Martinez?
I think a lot of the kind of the unhinged era of wrestling came when they were competing with other companies. Because back then, I want to say in the 90s and early 2000s, ECW had just formed and it was branded as this extreme form of wrestling, more extreme than the WWE. The WWE was kind of looked at as like kind of vanilla at that time because of how many crazy stunts and everything ECW was doing. So I think in competition with that, WWE tried their best to do the most unhinged things possible. And in doing so, a lot of controversies came out of it, a lot of things they don't like to talk about. Obviously, they like to talk about, the Attitude Era with Stone Cold, The Rock, and all those people, but they don't really focus on the ECW era where they were just trying to see who could do the more ridiculous thing. And, you have stuff like the Owen Hart controversy. You have
Oh
stuff
wait,
like
what is that? Hold on. I think it's a word from our sponsors. So this episode is sponsored by Bucked Up. Take your workouts and health to another level and get your protein, energy drinks, and even their famous mystery boxes from Bucked Up. Use code COLDTOPIC for 20% off all purchases. Make sure to check out the all-new Bucked Up Boot Camp coming January 7th. Now let's get back to Logan Martinez.
wow. So yeah, as I was saying, WWE was trying a lot of things to be radical and extreme, and one of the biggest things was the Owen Hart incident. As most wrestling fans know, Owen Hart died tragically when falling off of a zip line on a stunt during a WWE entrance. And while his death was catastrophic and a complete tragedy and an accident, the WWE decided to keep going. And even though there's been reports and articles that a lot of fans in the building knew that Owen Hart had passed, the WWE made the decision to not reveal that the Hart brother had passed and that to continue with the show. And for years, that's been looked at as one of the most controversial things in WWE because their decision to move past and lie to fans by not disclosing that Hart had passed. I was just wondering, like, what do you think about that? That WWE, regardless of what happens, remains a business free of human emotion and is just this one big machine. How do you feel about that?
Uh, you know, for a long time, a lot of people had said that Vince was like very like business orientated. You know, he loved money. He loved making sure that he was making a lot of money. That's why they had said the whole thing about how if you want to be the best in WWE, you take steroids. That was something that people would say. Because, for example, like they had a 3MB, you know, 3-man band, air guitars, all that stuff. All they were all like pretty small dudes. They weren't that big, and they left. All of them were fired. Every single one of them, I believe, between Heath before besides Heath Slater, came back on steroids, massive, and then automatically won the title. So like things like that, like he wants to have that more like ideal way of running things to where it's like everything's like it's his world. You know, it is his world. And if you whenever like something anything that was kind of like not going his way, anything random that happened, he would just burst out angry, try to ignore the things that he could ignore, which happened to be one like this kind of situation, you know. Owen Hart was pretty big in the industry during that time, and it was just like it's just something that you have to address. You know, when things like that happen, you gotta step away and do it. And I like how he does it now. Whenever there's a passing, he does a little ceremony on it. So that's pretty good that he learned to do that. I don't know if it was brought up to him because of that situation that they have to do these things now. But yeah, it's just something that should have been talked about.
I think I think he's being forced to do it now because you mean when you look at just wrestling in general, free from Vince McMahon, you know, you look at someone like the Von Erich brothers, a lot of them, a lot of wrestlers are just cogs in a emotionless machine that really just chews you up and spits you out. When you look at the Von Erich brothers, there's a movie coming out about them. When you look at them, a lot of them just killed themselves because they couldn't deal with the machine that was wrestling. And a lot of wrestlers end up killing themselves, going crazy, having serious mental issues because of this machine that is wrestling. And while it's very entertaining to a lot of people don't realize that once these wrestlers leave the ring, either for good or just after a match, they're real people that have real feelings and oftentimes real problems that plague them throughout their life that often doesn't get talked about, acknowledged, or helped, honestly, as far as WWE. I feel like they've done a better job of it now, trying to address mental health, trying to take care of the wrestlers. But as far as the 80s, 90s, even the early 2000s, I feel like mental health was kind of a laughing stock. If you showed any type of emotion back then, you were kind of looked at as a joke. You know, and speaking of that, one of the prime examples is Matt Hardy, you know, his controversial relationship with Lita and Edge and how Vince McMahon took a real thing that happened and embedded it into a storyline without Matt Hardy knowing. So do you want to talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah. Uh, I like the transition. That was good. So, oh man,
You're good.
this is one of those things where it's just wow. You know, certain things just shouldn't be taken on screen, and the fact that he did that was so. They were on a plane ride. Okay, there was two planes. They were going to a show, and Lita at the time was with Matt Hardy, and they were together. And it was just, I remember as Matt said, Lita, who was really like they were really good. They were both really good friends with Edge. Like they were all really good friends with each other. And Lita had asked Matt because Edge was on the plane by himself. You know, he was taking a ride. I think he like was late or something like that. He was gonna be late, and he was gonna take off late just by himself. And Lita asked Matt if she could go ahead and go with him. You know, so he's not by himself the whole ride. And Matt, being a good guy, he's like, "Oh, my best friend wouldn't do that, like anything to me, so I'm gonna go ahead and go. I'm gonna go ahead and send her." And things happened. Things happened on that plane ride, and they ended up getting together, Edge and Lita. And Vince, hearing this, some things became involved. Vince decided it was a good idea. Let's take this on the show. Let's make this a rivalry. So it became Edge versus Matt Hardy over the girl. And Lita ended up going with the Edge as if she did in real life. And there was some things after that brought up, like the bed scene, you know, and that's just kind of stuff like you shouldn't be showing. You shouldn't have that on there, knowing what really happened, especially to Matt. It was probably a horrible time for Matt.
I know that what happened. I know Matt Hardy has spoken on it, and he said it was a blind spot thing to have to relive that in a ring in front of millions of people, world nationwide, and it's something that has kind of been tried to cover up. A lot of these controversies have tried to have been covered up by Vince McMahon, by the WWE, and no one really talks about them anymore. There is one particular incident that's very off limits, but I know one of the other incidents you were talking about was the plane ride from hell.
Oh yes. So there was a real big incident that happened. I'm trying to remember what year it was. My memory's a little iffy on it. I can't 100% like bring it up. But so it was back from a live show, like kind of like a live show tour in the UK, and they were coming back to the US. And it started with there was the big guys on there. Everyone was on the plane, and everyone was on the plane heading back. Finished your show, they're partying a little bit. There's a open bar, free drinks. People get a little crazy. So it started. I believe there were some of them playing tag in the plane, and then I forgot there was one wrestler who was trying to kiss people, and then reportedly during this whole thing, Stone Cold and Deborah were watching a movie together and sleeping the whole night. So they weren't a part of this. But the big thing that really started first was Brock Lesnar, who was a rookie during this time. He was just the new guy. Henning, who I believe was known as Mr. Perfect, if I'm 100% sure, was challenging Brock Lesnar to wrestle on the plane. And Brock was just a rookie. He was like, the big veteran guys are going to call you out to do something. You're going to have to do it. So they were wrestling for the whole time, going at it. When, things got a little crazy. So they were told to separate, and supposedly Scott Hall was so intoxicated that they had to check his pulse multiple times to make sure he was still alive, because he was,
Razor,
huh?
the Razor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The razoring himself. So, anyways, then there's the big ones that we all know about. Ric Flair, he was stripped naked. All he had on was his robe, and he was strutting around the whole like plane, telling the workers there, the flight attendants, to touch him. And Goldust was also getting a little silly with him, but he was also spreading tobacco dip all over the floor of the plane. And then there's also instances. I think a worker he worked for WWE. I don't remember exactly what he was. Hayes. He had punched JBL in the face. When later on, JBL got his get back. They had a match. That's when JBL did the clothesline and actually knocked out Hayes in the actual match. And that was like his get back. But what people didn't know is Hayes also urinated on Linda McMahon. So
Wow,
yeah, that was a really big thing that happened on the plane.
really?
But yeah, so it was horrible. That's why they call it for. It was more for the people that worked on that plane. That had to take care of them. It was considered hell for them. And the result of this was Mr. Perfect, Kurt Hennig was fired. He was fired for fighting with Brock, because it was kind of like him trying to take advantage of Brock. Scott Hall was fired. Not only for that, he had some things coming up towards it, but he was released after that. That was like his last straw. Goldust was, a lot of people don't know, was almost fired, nearly fired, but they let him stay for a little bit longer, and he was able to get things back going. Hayes was fired because he was supposed to be the one that took care of them, but instead it was just unprofessional that day. And out of everyone, Ric Flair got away with everything.
I
Nothing
mean,
to him.
it's the
Huh?
nature boy. I mean, it's the nature boy. What are you
Yeah.
gonna do to him?
They made a lawsuit against Ric Flair. And WWE ended up taking it outside of the business, and nothing happened to Ric Flair. He wasn't held accountable. Nothing happened.
Nature.
So yeah, the Nature Boy. And another thing that you know, Ric Flair was not the best guy in the world. A lot of people know this. He had a lot of things going on. He was harassing a lot of the female wrestlers. And one of the things that really was that he said that was really hit on him hard and held against him. One of the first times WWE was like, "All right, we can't be saying that kind of stuff." Was a promo against Randy Orton, and Ric Flair was with Triple H in the ring, and he held up his mic. I'm quoting Ric Flair. I am quoting Ric Flair, just for y'all know. He said, "I look at you and I say, virgin, and you know how many virgins I've made bleed." So this was like something big. It's like a lot of people they're like, you can't say that kind of stuff. So there were certain situations where the people that ran the promos, that ran all that with Vince, they were just like, we can't say that. You know, we can't be saying those kind of things. And Ric Flair, that wasn't a line. That was something he decided to say.
I feel like when people, the thing that gets lost is that these wrestlers are not their personalities. You know, this kind of goes back to the last topic we talked about, where people see these wrestlers and they think, oh, that's who they are. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they see Ric Flair and then they look past all the alcohol abuse, physical abuse that he's done, and they just say, well, you know, Nature Boy, you can't really get mad at him. And a lot of people forget that, you know, some of these wrestlers are bad people that had bad relationships. You know, Ultimate Warrior is one that I can think a lot of people didn't like him because he was all about himself. He didn't love to wrestle. He just loved to do his own thing in the ring, and he did make a lot of enemies. But even then, in the industry, you know, when there are some good people, you know, Bret Hart comes to mind as one of the wrestlers that other wrestlers and coworkers of him don't have a whole lot of bad things to say about him, as opposed to others such as Shawn Michaels, Ultimate War. And even he, for all he did for the business, he still got screwed in the machine that is the WWE and what's famously known as the Montreal Screwjob. So, what do you remember about the Montreal Screwjob?
Well, I don't remember it because I wasn't alive, but
I thought
let's
you
go.
were
Whoa, let's calm
doing this
down.
podcast with.
So let's not forget that WWE isn't real. Okay, let's not go past that, but let's get to the part where some parts really do become real. So during this time, Bret Hart had made it like he was the champion at the time. You know, he was the guy, and he had made it known that he's leaving the WCW. You know, he was like, I'm not going to extend my contract. I'm not doing this. I'm going to WCW, and I'm taking the title with me because he wasn't supposed to retain. Like the original script was him retaining, and he was fighting Shawn Michaels. They had a good rivalry going. It was a great rivalry between them. Good matches, and so Vince was like, he's not going to let the title go. You know, he doesn't want to lose it, but if we let him win, he's just gonna our champion's just gonna walk out with the belt. He's gonna leave the company with the belt, and where does that leave us? So they're trying to get Shawn Michaels to win, and Brett was like no, and Shawn was like no, like out of respect, he was like no. So Vince was thinking, and he was like, he knows what he's got to do. He's like, this is a business call, and like we said, business is what matters to Vince. So he decided that he was going to go into when the match happened. He was going to make Shawn win, but neither one of them wanted to have Shawn win. So he told the referee that to screw Brett over, and that when they get put in submission, when Brett gets put in a submission, to just ring the bell and say that he tapped, and give Shawn the championship. So during the match, you know, I believe he puts him in the the crab. What was it called? Is it the Boston crab?
The
Or like,
sharp, sir.
did he have a sharpshooter?
Well, he put him in Bret Hart's own sharpshooter. That was one of the biggest.
Okay,
Tips.
okay, yeah.
He put him in Bret Hart's own move to screw him.
Why did I think he put him in the Boston crab? Or he put him in the sharpshooter,
Thinking about crabs.
the Boston crab. So he put him in the sharpshooter, and then they just rung the bell, and everyone was shocked because the only person that knew this was happening was Vince and the referee. That was it. No one else knew this was going to go down because they didn't want the word to get out. And they did it. Brett was furious. He was angry. He lost the title. Shawn was the champ, and there's some audio leaked where they went to the when they're in the back, and Brett was just yelling. He was angry and he was yelling at Shawn. He was like, "Did you know about this? Did you know about this?" And Shawn was like, "No, I swear, I didn't know anything." So it was just showing that like Vince really did whatever he could to win, but at the same time, it's a hard situation right there. And I just want to curious, like, what do you think should have happened, Logan?
I think, it's kind of a lose lose when you're dealing with someone like Bret Hart who refuses to give up the title and also refuses to sign the contract. You do have to make decisions that will ultimately benefit the WWE. And that kind of goes back to the whole machine aspect, and that the WWE is going to remain one of the biggest wrestling federation no matter what. No matter what wrestlers come through there, countless have come in, countless have left, come back. It has still remained the biggest wrestling federation in the world, honestly. And when you have someone like Bret Hart, a national favorite, a fan favorite, known worldwide, famous, and he wants to leave, you can't let him leave with your title. And while I think it's more like it was morally wrong to not tell him, there's things you do have to do to keep your business running. And that's why I think the WWE is really just a machine devoid of all emotion, emotion for the wrestlers, emotion for honestly the fans in some way, the way it's lied to the fans in some aspects. But it's still running, regardless of what Vince McMahon has done that's unethical, what has been controversial. He still managed to make his business one of the biggest in the entire world. And I think as a wrestler, I want to get your opinion on this. I feel like as a wrestler, you should know what you're getting into. I mean, you know that wrestling is not a fair game. It's not easy on the body. It's not easy on the mind. They're on the road a lot. And I feel like a lot of these wrestlers, when they get screwed over, they kind of say like, oh, how could this happen to me? Oh, how can this is not right. But I feel like when you look at past events and past wrestlers, it's been happening since wrestling's invention. So I wanted to get your opinion. I believe wrestlers should know what they're getting into. It's kind of like running backs in the NFL. It's easily replaceable. You're easily replaceable by the next guy who's coming up. And it's not really the machine who's at fault. It's the wrestlers for thinking that they're getting into something that's going to be fair and beneficial for them. What do you think?
I do agree with that, but you just got to think about it like it goes with like even becoming like a movie star or something. You know what you're getting yourself into, but you don't truly know what you're getting yourself into. It's like one of the things where you don't know exactly what it's like until you're there. And I feel like that's why another thing when people are like, I see stuff about like people were talking about WWE and they're like, oh, it's fake. They're doing nothing. They're still taking the bumps. They're still doing all these flips. They're still taking those hits. They're putting themselves in situations where they can break or tear something like instantly, easily. And I remember one time talking about the whole life that they live. Triple H, I think you may have seen this clip too. He was with the train, like the new like people that are coming up. They were going through training, and he was saying, "Who wants to do this? Like, who actually wants to do this?" And I think only like a few people raised their hand, and he was asking like, "Y'all, why do you want to do this?" And some people were like, "Oh, I think it'd be fun, something new, and stuff like that." And he's like, "That's not why you do this kind of stuff. You don't just want to do this because it seems cool. Like, you gotta want to do this." Because he was looking at them, he was like, you're on the road 24/7. And he was like, you have a wife, you have a kids. You don't know what your wife is doing. You're not home with her. She's like the last person you're gonna see. You got to think about that kind of stuff. You know, you don't see your wife, you don't see your kids. Your kids, when they grow up, they're not going to know who you are most of the time. They're just going to know that you're on TV. You know, they'll be like, oh, that's my dad wrestling, but they're not going to know who their dad actually is. So you got to like picture that kind of stuff. When you're wrestling, you're not going to be able to have that life. You're stripped from that life, and you're becoming a character. I feel like that's a lot of things that people don't like really picture. Is like you are getting rid of the whole idea of being a human being. That life is done. All that's over. And the only thing that matters now is I'm this character. You know, I gotta be this person for all the fans watching, for everyone. I gotta be this character from now on. And that loses you a lot of relationships with the actual family you have.
Yeah, you say that a lot of these wrestlers don't really see their wife and children, and that's mainly one of the biggest reasons why a lot of marriages that happen with wrestlers end abruptly or end after a couple of years because they're just never around. And you're right, they're not humans. They're kind of stripped of all humanity once entering the WWE. Their lives are filmed. Even up and coming wrestlers, I remember NXT. I don't know if that's still going on, but I remember NXT used to be a really big thing, talking about wrestlers trying to build up their characters. And even that, in that sense, they're kind of stripped of all humanity, and they're really just kind of like not so much animals, but really just on-site spectacles to look at and not be taken as humans. Even fans, we look at them and we say, I like this character, I like this character, but we never know what they're like, what they're dealing with. We just know how they are on TV. And yeah.
Yeah. And then also like moments where they're like when they're talking to you and they're like, why is he not acting like this? Why is he not acting like that? Especially with kids. The biggest thing takeaway is with kids because kids think that's the real you. They think what you're portraying is who you actually are. And that's when it goes to like, you know, because at the end of the day, they are human beings. They're going to have outbursts. They're going to have moments where they just lose it. And they lose those moments and they ended up ruining for kids. And that's when the parents get angry. People get mad. People start hating that person. And you know, one little interaction is all it takes for someone to see you as a bad guy, especially
But you
when
can you really blame them though? I mean, you're forced to be this character for so much time out of the year, and sometimes wrestlers or even just famous people in general, they're in public and people come up to them. I always think not that they're being mean in a sense, but that sometimes they just want to live their life as them. They don't want to be this character 24/7. But in that sense, that comes back to upholding this image that you always have with all your fans, and you can never really just be yourself. You can never just be like the person you are. You have to remain this character for as long as you're in public for everything.
well, this goes back to the point you made where you said you should know what you're getting yourself into. Because if you want to be, everyone's like, oh, I want to be this big celebrity. I want to be all this. I want to be all that. You are saying you don't want to live your regular life as being a human being. You want to live your life for the people and not for yourself. That's what this becomes. You becoming everything you do is for everyone else, everyone else's things. That's all their entertainment. That's your life now. Your life isn't what you want to do, it's what everyone else wants to see you do.
Do you think that should be the same after they retire? Someone like the Undertaker or Hulk Hogan, that's being walked like greeted by many fans and expecting them to be this character. Do you think that should still be the case even when they're retired?
Well, it can really depend, you know, because I feel like after a while, when people retire, they kind of step away from that. Because let's take example Kane, he became a mayor. How is a big red monster going to go ahead and become a mayor? So that's like something you just got to think about, like situations like that. I feel like yeah, you can really step away from the character. You could become your own person, but I feel like there's some people that will never be able to be seen as that.
Yeah. You
So
have any?
what was that, Martinez?
You have anything else?
I think that was all. I was about to wrap it up for us right now. So it's been a good one, guys. I really, you know, good talking. Till next time, we'll talk to y'all later. It's me, John Guetta, and
Yeah.
Logan Martinez. All right, y'all have a good rest of y'all's day.